Perfect. We're live now.
Okay. It's on your channel, yeah? Let me just
Yeah.
quickly.
I mean, of course, it's on my channel. How would I post it on your channel?
Why not?
Now, how would I do that?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were trying to make some condescending remark.
No.
Is that you? You in the background?
Yeah, there's a church nearby. The bells are going, um, ringing, I guess. Is that the word? Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
So I'm just sharing the video on all the platforms and stuff. And we can wait for some people
Okay.
to be here. Um, Pod with Shia Muslims. Yeah, I'll address the question about the Muawiyah thing, but we can do that in a minute when there's more people here.
Yeah.
So anyhow, wa alaikum salam. So I'm about to hit 200K soon.
Very
Um,
nice.
yeah, like it's currently at 180, 198.5. So yeah,
Very.
in a couple of days, I guess. So yeah, it's taken like much longer than I had expected. Uh,
Really?
yeah, in terms of growth, during COVID, the channel had a lot of growth at that time,
Okay.
and projection that at that time actually put the channel in 2024 at a million, if the growth had continued. Uh,
Wow.
then I didn't make videos all that much, and so slowly it just sort of fizzled out. Um, but yeah.
Well, that's good. I mean, you've taken like big breaks where you don't upload anything, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So considering, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean that really kills engagement and the growth and all that, when you take breaks. So yeah, hopefully I won't be taking any more anytime soon. Um, I mean, I've got a pretty clear schedule now of the videos that I'm gonna make. I've got some scripts ready, stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully gonna continue doing things. Plus the new sort of template that I'm working on, it allows me to make videos in a different way. Uh, like with for example, I've got a series on the Fatimids plan. Before that, there were no images, so there was a lot of problem there. But now yeah,
Yeah, I feel your pain on that one, man. Imagine having to do a 52-minute documentary.
on the
Uh,
Fatimids.
yes, with very little images and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean most empires other than the Ottomans, the Mughals, and the Safavids, there are no images.
The Safavids, huh? You found a bunch?
Yeah, there are a lot of images for the Safavids, the Mughals, and the Ottomans, but before them, there's nothing.
Okay.
That's the reason that I didn't want to do my video on Muawiyah. Um, I've had the script for 2 years, but I didn't make the video because I couldn't find any images. There were no images about the Umayyads, and I didn't want to just fill it's 38 minutes, I think. I didn't want to fill the whole thing with just stock images of random armies and stuff.
Mm,
So that's the reason that I decided not to do that.
that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. This is why I tell you to wake up early so we can have a live stream early. Most of our audience is gone by this point.
Are they?
Yeah, by this point, this it's like 10 here in the morning, and our channel audiences are mostly gone by this point.
With me, that's not necessarily the case. I think mine goes all the way up until like 8 p.m. GMT. But it doesn't matter. Let's just move on anyway,
That's
because
fine.
it's going to be useful for posterity.
I just watched Daniel's latest video about British Sardinia and made me wonder why the Aghlabids aim to take Sicily instead of Sardinia. Why is this? What do you guys thought on this? Do you know about this?
I know a little bit. I definitely don't know the answer to this question. No. Why did they take Sicily instead of Sardinia? I mean, proximity-wise, it does make sense.
Yeah,
right?
That's pretty much the only reason. Actually, the real question would be why did they want to take Sicily or Sardinia at all? Because they had before this they had just been raiding Christian territory, and they could have easily just kept doing that. But they were invited by a Byzantine general there to take over Sicily. And pretty much by the time that they were done with Sicily, they were done with Sicily in, I think, 902, right?
Yeah.
And in 909, their territory was starting to be taken over by the Fatimids. So I think that if they had maybe stayed in Sicily for quite a while, they could have maybe. But again, I don't see Sardinia as being either useful to the Aghlabids or like a priority for them. I don't think that they would have ever taken Sicily. To some extent, makes sense, but Sardinia was just too far away.
Wait, I need to get a mental image of the Mediterranean. So Sardinia is further south than Corsica, right?
Where's Corsica? Yeah, Sardinia and Corsica, they're together. I'm not sure which one is Sardinia, which one is Corsica, but yeah, they're there.
Hold on. Let me get Google Maps because I know from the from Al Andalus, the Balearic Islands were also.
Yeah, they're on the Iberian side.
Yes. Oh, okay.
To Italy.
Okay, this makes sense. Yeah. So that's. Oh, okay. Yeah. So Corsica is above Sardinia, basically.
Yeah. Also, an interesting thing that I've noticed, for some islands, for quite a few islands actually, especially with mountains and stuff, there's a pattern that invasions actually made them more Muslim or Christian. In Indonesia, when the Europeans arrived, they pushed the Muslims inland, and the Muslims then started to convert the local population. The same thing happened in Sardinia. Because when the Muslims started raiding, people started moving to the inland, and as a result, there were before that there were pagans, what has been described as pagans by a Christian cleric. I don't know what the right word would be here.
Priest.
Yeah, priest. He described that there were pagans still living on Sardinia in the 7th century. But then when Muslims started raiding the Christians from the coast, they started moving inwards, and they led to the Christianization of the islands. So it's very interesting that invasions and raids contribute to this kind of thing.
Yeah, I learned when I was doing research for my Barbary Pirates videos.
Mm-hmm.
I learned just how big of a deal it was. Not necessarily because of how many people were enslaved, but just the kind of overall second-hand effect, indirect effect that it would have had on certain European societies. The one that you just mentioned right now, like coastal regions, were basically always on high alert.
Yeah,
quite a while actually.
I mean, this state of terror, I guess. Today we would use the word terror for that.
Terror, I know, because that's such a great and appropriate word to describe it, but
yeah,
its meaning.
Today we would do that. In the past, that was not the word, but today, I guess we would do that. So, do you see any question? Yeah, let me address this really quickly. It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. A lot of people didn't really get the point of the video, and a lot of people are really too emotional about that. So yeah, it was pretty bad.
Okay.
Tariq, here's a question for you. There are a number of videos about what if the Siege of Constant. Which one makes sense to you among the most among them?
I don't know, dude. I don't think I've seen them. About what if the siege of... I don't know which videos you're referring to, man. Unfortunately.
But you know, what about Constantinople in general? Do you think that they could have been that Suleiman could have taken it?
Yeah, for sure. I think he could have taken it. I have my own theories of what could have happened if it was successful. But I do think that it's probably the most interesting and important what if scenario in a battle. I can't really think of one that trumps it. I mean, you have the typical ones, Angelut, which I think can be fairly easily dispelled by just taking into account the chaotic nature of Mongol imperial rule, and every time a Khagan dies, what happens there dynastically. The Battle of Tours, I think, not to sound arrogant, but I think that's real easy to dispel as well. Certain other ones, but the Siege of Constantinople, the Umayyads took it really, really seriously. Like really, really seriously. It almost felt like it was a last-ditch attempt. It almost felt as if they thought victory would be assured with the amount of resources and manpower that they dedicated to it. And if it was successful, if it was successful, I think what would have happened is the Islamization of Anatolia would have taken place significantly earlier than it actually did, a couple of centuries earlier, because even by that point, 717. So yeah, even by that point, southeastern and a good chunk of like eastern, going all the way into like certain parts of central Anatolia, were, if not under Umayyad control, it was referred to as the Thoghur, I think is the word, the frontier region.
Yeah, in English, I use the word no man's land in my video.
Nice. But I'm a big fan of frontiers, like studying frontiers in historical context, because they have their own fascinating insights. But for the purpose of my argument, it was essentially like it was considered no man's land, like you mentioned. Sometimes it would be in the control of the Byzantines, sometimes it would be in the control of the Muslims, and to kind of have like a pincer action going on, where you've got Constantinople here that's controlled by the Muslims if the siege was successful, and then their territories moving on from like northern Syria, southeastern Anatolia. I think that would have happened very quickly, and it was not that far away from the Dar al-Islam, so reinforcing it would not have been super difficult, as opposed to something like the Battle of Tours, where, okay, you win the Battle of Tours, you keep going forward into like northern France, eastern Germany, western Germany. Like, what do? You're kind of in no man's land.
Yeah.
You know? You're in the middle of nowhere. And then from there, the only real issue I could see would be the Bulgarian Empire, if I'm correct. The second Bulgarian Empire, I think it was, or maybe the first, I don't know. But I think they were a pretty, prominent force to reckon with. But I mean, apart from that, what do you have stopping you? And I'm not saying that the Umayyads would have gone ahead and conquered the Balkans in a decade and then joined up with the Muslims from Al-Andalus within like 2-3 decades, anything like that. I'm just saying, even if they chilled after taking Constantinople for the next 100 years, even then it would have been history defining.
Yeah, I personally don't think that if they had been successful, they would have actually made a push into Much of the Balkans. Maybe the Balkans they could have taken because of the naval aspect of that, but beyond that, I really don't think. For example, Hungary and all the way to Vienna and all that. I don't think that would
I
have.
mean, it could have happened, but you would have to assume that it would take quite a long time.
But you also have to factor in the fact that the Umayyads, the capital, Damascus, was too far from Constantinople, was quite far. But the distance, I guess, was reduced by the fact that there was a naval aspect in that whole thing. But
Yeah.
also, Constantinople was very important. It was the symbolic heart of Christianity.
Mhm.
But I think that other than that, I don't think on the Umayyad side even there would have been a much interest in going further than the Balkans.
There definitely wouldn't have been. Well, first of all, there definitely would have been interest. Not because there's anything special about Europe. Don't get too excited, Europeans. It's just conquest. But the internal issues that the Umayyads were having, they would have put a
Mhm.
massive hole in any further plan for conquest,
I mean,
without
yeah,
a shadow of a doubt.
there's a question about that. So, um, yeah. Do you see the Umayyad Caliphate lasting longer if it didn't expand as quickly? No, it had major internal problems that simply, if it was a modern nation state, if the Umayyad Caliphate was a modern nation state, then we would say that this nation state needs to be dissolved and a new constitution needs to be implemented. That's how bad their internal structures were. I mean, not. I'm not saying that it was horrible, but first of all, their sort of Arab supremacy kind of idea that was terrible. That was really bad for the empire. But other than that, overall, the empire was had many problems on the inside, so it wouldn't have lasted much longer than it had already.
Can I pitch in here?
Yeah, of course. That's why the question is on screen.
Okay. I don't agree with you, to be honest. I don't think I wouldn't say you're wrong, but I think your line of reasoning, with respectfully speaking, is a little on the pessimistic side, because it doesn't factor into account the Umayyads' ability to potentially learn as they go along. The reason why, and this is why I will put my hands up. I never talk about my political affiliate ideology, or what I think, ideological affiliations or anything like that. The only thing I'm proud of saying is I like things to happen slowly. And one of the great things with things happening slowly, development specifically, is that it allows you to absorb new information and to subsequently put that into practice. So I'm not saying that the Umayyads would have learned the error of their ways necessarily, like confidently, but I think there is a possibility of that happening. And if it took a longer period of time, the subsequent blowback, which actually happened in real life, the Great Berber Revolt,
Mhm.
Persians getting behind the
Bas-
Abbasids, that wouldn't have. I think it's safe to say that I can make an argument that it wouldn't have materialized in such a radical, extreme manner. It could have manifested itself in a slightly less chaotic way, and at that point, it would be up to the Umayyads of whether they wanted to learn about, to grow and to accommodate, or not necessarily. I mean, even if you look at Muawiyah, the guy, respectfully speaking, was a Bedouin from the desert. And I
Mhm.
know that his family was involved in trade and mercantilism, and that gave him exposure to different groups of people and traveling and things of that nature. But when he moved the seat of the Khilafah to Syria, he incorporated a lot of statehood practices, statecraft practices from the Byzantines and even the Sassanids, I'm guessing, but I'm not sure about that. The Byzantines, I'm sure about. That takes a certain level of intelligence to be able to incorporate new information, and learn from it. So, why would we not think that if they were allowed to be around for a longer period of time, that they wouldn't have picked that up? The Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
I guess yeah, that makes sense. You're right about that. That they could have learned,
Mhm.
and by that time they were already beginning to shift in some ways. They had already sort of started a proto translation movement with the
Yeah.
Greeks and stuff. So yeah, the tendency that if we talk about alternate history, then we should also accommodate for the fact that yeah, they could have learned, they could have changed. So yeah. Would you say that the practice of polygamy is the reason why Islamic has fewer historical succession crises and fewer female monarchs as compared to their Western counterparts? So, in terms of female monarchs, I guess the Western empires only had female monarchs because they tended to run out of male monarchs, male
Yeah.
heirs.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
in that case, polygamy. I wouldn't say polygamy, I guess, because um, the vast majority of caliphs among the Abbasids, the Ottomans, were born not to wives but to concubines, and that sort of became the common practice in the later life of any both of these empires. Not later, but like after the beginning. So I would say that the concubine system was there. I mean, that kind of existed in Europe too, right?
Concubine system?
Yeah.
No, I don't think it was formal,
Mhm.
but they would have mistresses and stuff like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I think
not like an actual concubine system, as far as I'm aware. I don't
yeah,
think.
I think that's where the change comes, that they could only have children that were heirs with their wives.
Hmm.
Um, so that was I think where the problem comes from. Plus the infant mortality rate at the time and all these different factors they contributed. But the Muslims, they just had so many heirs that they had the opposite problem. They would have too many heirs, and then they would go to war, and so
I'm kind
yeah.
of confused by this question. First of all, it's two different questions, but the first part of the question, i- did Islamic empires have fewer succession crises? Did they?
The crisis, in the way that we call it a crisis in a European sense, is different than crisis in an Islamic sense. In the European sense, there was no heir, so all these different relatives came across, and they were fight, and there was a king died in Spain, and then the French were involved, and then the Germans were involved, and stuff like that. Always got complicated. In the Islamic world, succession crisis that never almost happened, right?
What about the
They
Ottomans? What about the Mughals? What about fratricide?
Those weren't crises; they were wars of succession. They were wars about who among the sons of the king is going to sit on the throne. But the succession
Right.
crises in the European sense were more
Mm,
wide. Plus, you never had, for example, the Safavids enter a conflict in the Mughals' succession plan. But in Europe, that was quite common when there was a war of Spanish succession, war of, well, there were quite a few Italian succession as well, I think.
mhm.
So that I think in the same sense, there's a difference there.
Okay, but yeah, again, I don't understand how polygamy can be brought into that exactly.
Yeah,
Uh, but also fewer female monarchs compared to. I don't know if that's to do with polygamy. I think that's just straight up culture. I
that's
mean,
just straight
even
up fact that they almost always had sons because of the women in their harems and stuff.
yeah.
Uh,
First, I would note, or I would re-emphasize something you said at the beginning. It's not as if Europe was inviting women to be rulers. I hope people understand that.
yeah,
Almost always, they had no other choice, right? And in the Islamic world, there's diversity within different Islamic cultures. Like the Turks, for instance, the Turks give a lot more, historically speaking, a lot more power and precedent to a woman being involved in statecraft. Essentially, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the official title of a sultana or anything like that, but just like a sultan's mom, a sultan's wife, the Safavids, the sultan's sister too, actually, they'd get involved in that way. But I don't really see how that's related to polygamy per se. So, Siawish, why are you hiding?
yeah. Just continue for a minute. I'm making tea. I gotta check up on that.
Okay. So let's see. Is there another question? Do you guys think Shahzadeh Mustafa is innocent? Magnificent Century. I don't know if he's innocent. I mean, he seems innocent. He does. But then you also have to take into account that people develop a narrative in their heads, like posthumously. You know what I mean? And Shehzade Mustafa has gotten this reputation as being killed unfairly, unjustly. So everything you're going to kind of hear about that is going to follow on from there. If he was actually innocent in terms of was he rebelling against his father, I don't know. Maybe he was. Suleiman was getting old. He had other brothers. He knew the stakes that if he didn't become a sultan, it probably meant his own death. He was the oldest. He was capable. He was he was probably making preparations for that. If he was smart, he'd be making preparations for when Suleiman died and what happens after.
You're talking about this?
Shehzade Mustafa. Yeah.
Is this the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. But to be honest with you, I don't really know how much of a difference it would have made if he actually became sultan. Because I know traditionally people's argument is that he was significantly more competent than his brothers. And to be fair, by all intents and purposes, it definitely seems that way. Especially his brother, who I think his nickname is literally drunkard, or Sot or something, Selim II. But you got to take into account the Ottoman infrastructure, like internal state infrastructure, was developing and becoming more and more sophisticated and growing. So that traditional idea of one man who rules it right at the top, that was always going to get diluted. Like it wasn't possible. Because you were having an infrastructure that was becoming much more developed. And whilst that sounds like a really bad thing, forget if it's a good or a bad thing. It's absolutely necessary. An empire the size of the Ottomans towards the end of the 16th century, you can't have one man ruling that. Well, you can, but then if that man dies, that empire is just being divided into multiple bits, kind of like with the Mongols, right? So you need to have administrators, viziers, bureaucrats, boring paperwork type people, accountants, lawyers, things like that. And it wouldn't really have been feasible to have this one strong man who just dictates everything.
I think that also brings me to something that I've been thinking about. Last time somebody asked us what would be our biggest what if historical moment. And I've been thinking about what if Aurangzeb had died a couple of years earlier in 1689. When you look at the Ottomans, they had the same succession system. You had to fight your brothers and you had to kill your brothers or something. You had to compete with your brothers and then come to power. And the Mughals had the same system. Aurangzeb had come to power the same way, but by the time that he died in 1705 or 1707, I always confuse the two because one of them is the death of Aurangzeb, one of them is the death of Guru Gobind Singh. If he had died a few years earlier in 1689 or so, then his sons were relatively young. They could have gone to war. They could have, a more powerful son could have come to power. Plus, Aurangzeb was not as paranoid at the time. I think that if that had happened, then maybe the Mughal state could have actually been quite a bit of powerful, and that is where the Ottomans never had a sultan like that who lived like 80 years.
Very nice. I'm really glad you said that, because now I'm gonna go back on everything I just said before. even though I said that once a empire starts expanding up into a certain point, or has been in power up until a certain point, an emperor does need to dilute his power in order to allow infrastructure to grow, and so other people can have power and everything. It is still vital that the person on top is at the very minimum. This is at the very minimum. I know this is really high standards, but this is at the very minimum. It is vital for that man at the top to keep all his administrators in check, right? Because what happened once Aurangzeb died, and that was such an excellent example, by the way. I've never really thought about that, actually, if Aurangzeb had died 20 years before he actually did. But that's fascinating. My mind is on fire right now with scenarios. Um, because what happened with the Mughals after he died was it was just a bunch of different administrators with their own vested interests. Those two brothers, the Sayyid brothers, right?
Say those.
They just hijacked everything.
Um,
They just hijacked everything for like a decade. There was no Mughal empire. It was the Sayyid brothers' empire.
Yeah.
Um, you allow them to get into such a position of power that even though you have dynastic legitimacy as the emperor to rule, your words don't mean that much as opposed to that.
Essentially a puppet.
Definitely, exactly. Didn't the Mughals have like 4 emperors between 1707 to 1718, right?
Yeah, in a couple of years. I don't remember what years it was. No, the first one, Bahadur Shah the first, he was actually half decent. I think he ruled till 1715, and then after that, there were Azim Shan and all these brothers. They.
By the way, dude, your dates are all over the place. It was 1712, and Aurangzeb died in 1707. Sorry,
Okay. Yeah, I always have trouble with live streams because of that. Yeah, I think that the Turco-Mongol system wasn't built for an emperor to live that long. I think that that's the reason that if your father is starting to live too long, then you gotta overthrow him. And that was sort of what the system was built around, but that didn't happen with Aurangzeb.
Listen. I thought this question we were going to answer for like 10 seconds and then we were going to move on. But I like what this question has spawned. See, this is why the Ottomans, they have to be my favorite empire of all time because they're incredible. They typically what happens with human beings, like individual human beings and then groups as well, is that they fall into patterns. Not to sound like a know-it-all or anything, but if you observe and if you analyze something, you can pretty much discern patterns in everything. My favorite thing about the Ottomans is they go against what should have happened, right? So like what you just mentioned right now, typically with Turkic empires, you need, what you're basically talking about is, what's that word? Not vitriol, but like, vitality, whatever. You need male vitality. I hope I'm not being inappropriate when I say that. You need like dynamic energy, right? And when you're old, that obviously undermines that, right? So that's why you had fratricide in the first place. But then halfway through, the Ottomans get rid of fratricide. And yes, you can make an argument that at the time that they got rid of fratricide is also around the time that they start stagnating and then subsequently start declining. But they continue for another 300 years. That doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to happen that way. Typically, when a Turkic empire gets to that stage where it strips away its own identity, it strips away the things that it required to get to the top, within maximum a century, that state is it shouldn't even be considered a state, even if it still exists, right? But they had this ability to get through issues like that. Like the Mughals, one of the greatest powers on planet Earth's history in recorded civilization, but they fell into they followed a certain pattern, and it happened the way you could have predicted that it would have happened. With the Ottomans, that wasn't the case so much. They proved people wrong a lot.
I actually think about what Ibn Khaldun would say if he saw the Ottoman Empire, because they didn't follow his pattern. They came from, these nomadic tribes. They came to live in cities, grand cities. And at that point, according to Ibn Khaldun, they should have stagnated. They should have become weaker.
There you go.
That didn't happen. It's incredible. And I think with the Mughals, the same thing could have, to some extent, happened if Aurangzeb had died earlier. But he just...
Yeah. But I read somewhere, I really hope I can find it again, and I hope people do more scholarship on this, if it is true. I read somewhere that the Ottomans actually studied Ibn Khaldun.
Probably did, because Ibn Khaldun was... And the Ottomans, they were quite big on these... No,
but that's genius, dude. Do you understand? That's flipping genius. Like, you want to prolong your life as an empire. You want to buck the trend and not fall into the same pitfalls that other people do. So you go to the drawing board and you learn how to not do that. That tells you why they are probably the greatest Islamic power of all time. Like the fact that they had an interest in doing that, that's amazing.
I mean, I guess, yeah. So this question about slavery, do you want to talk about it?
Was slavery in the Abbasid any different than the Umayyad or their predecessors? To be honest with you, I don't know that much. I thought no is the answer. I thought it was pretty much similar.
I would say the same as well. I think the Abbas, in terms of the treatment of the slaves, it pretty much never changed. There were people who treated them very badly. There were people who treated them less badly, stuff like that. The Zanj revolt indicate an increase in slave trade and economy. That's an interesting point. I guess to some extent there was an increase when the Abbasids came through, because the Abbasids were trying to build a more consolidated economy. So there was an increase in slave trade. There was an increase in capturing slaves as well. So that was, but whenever the slaves in the West, in the East, whenever they were economically useful, then people got them. They were captured more often. We also saw more brutality in that. But when they weren't as useful anymore, then we saw things start to get lax. So that's the thing. Do you see any other question you want to take?
There's a lot of questions about Qasim Sultan, but I guess we talked about the Ottomans a fair amount. We can move on.
You also made a video on her, so I guess people can watch that if they want.
Yeah, Sultanate of Women, check that out.
Yeah. I mean, you've been making really good videos recently. I gotta say that.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. The reason I appreciate it more so than anything is because I'm really putting in the effort. Like, dude, I'm learning flipping Photoshop right now. Like me, a dude from the mountains. You told me like a year ago, like learn Photoshop. I'm like, how am I gonna do that? How am I gonna? But yeah, so I'm really trying to put in effort.
I'm actually shocked that you're only learning it now, because you gotta do some things with Photoshop, make a thumbnail, even edit video photos and stuff.
I just had very helpful people to help me up until this point, but there's always a limit on how helpful people can be. So I had to do it myself.
I gotta address this really quickly. This will be addressed in a video I have coming out called How Sicily Became an Islamic Island. Because even after Muslim rule was gone, there was a lot of Islam still left in there. It was pretty much, what you say, an Islamic empire. Roger's empire was quite Islamic in its nature, and so I will be addressing that in a video.
Very nice.
In the future video. So, any other question?
Okay.
There's some questions about my Muawiyah video. Can I take them?
Of course you can, man. Yeah, I'm fascinated. By the way, that was a great video too, if we're doing this whole positivity thing. And I'm being honest as well. I watched it. Very good. I liked but that was not my favorite video of yours recently. 1 second. Let me go to your channel real quick. Where is your channel? Oh, the Egypt one. Boda Chavod.
Thank you.
I like that one.
Yeah, I put a lot of work into that. I had to read so much for that. I kept thinking, okay, I've read enough. I can get on a script. But then I was like, no, there's more, and there's this. It was so exhausting to work on that.
Dude, I don't know. Let me just talk to other people now. I know from the title that it probably sounds like it's not that difficult, but the nature of that video, I'm assuming, I haven't even attempted to do one like that, would be very challenging, because you have to go into, you basically have to know about two things. You have to know about the medieval times, like fast forward 500 years, and then you also have to know about like ancient Egypt as well, and that can be very difficult reading. So did you have to read primary sources? I'm sure. I did
read some, but they were all some old translations from the 1800s. But I did read quite a few of them to sort of get an idea of what exactly. And I'm pretty sure that I missed quite a few. But yeah, I had to read a lot.
Who did you read, by the way? Which primary sources, primary scholars?
I read Al-Maqrizi's work, the one in Egypt, Abdul Latif al-Baghdadi, al-Masudi, and a couple more, but there were also modern papers and books and stuff. So yeah, a lot of work.
Ibn Athir didn't have anything on ancient Egypt.
I think he does. I actually didn't go into that. I think he does. Actually, I
Okay.
don't. I actually, now that I think about it, I don't think he does. He did live in Egypt, but by the 11th century, he died in like 1200s, right? Let me
Yeah,
check.
yeah, he was around the Mongol times,
Yeah.
Mongol invasion times.
I don't know if he wrote anything. Actually, I didn't come
Okay.
across his name in anything.
No worries, no worries.
I
Okay,
didn't read.
answer this question because I'm actually interested in the answers
Okay,
to
give
the
me
second
1
one.
minute. I can take a look at my tea again. Before, what happened is that the tea boiled over, and I had to add milk again. I always get distracted by making tea.
Okay. Why do you put milk in your tea, man? You've become westernized. Hi, everyone. How are you guys doing? So, if you guys don't know, I'm Hikmah History. I have my own channel. Don't tell see I wish, but it's actually better than his. I'm basically the one that taught him everything he knows. Like in life, I mean, not just in YouTube, like in every sense of the word. Like when he has a problem in life, he comes to me. But yeah. Okay, any other questions? I'm not going to pin them, but how per, what primary sources, milk and tea is good, whatever. Hikmah History is so underrated. Thank you, Arabic Calligraphy. Tarek, you used to say that the Ottoman Empire is a European power, but I remember Tiawish said otherwise because of it. So which is correct? They're both correct. The Ottomans did have Turkic origins, but it can also definitely be counted as a European power. I mean, for like 200 years, they
Yep.
controlled a big portion of Europe, so it's a no-brainer.
They also interfered in European politics, and European powers were always concerned about them as well. So,
Yeah, and even like officially, it seemed like a big deal for them to legitimize themselves within Western politics, right?
Mhm.
With the title of Caesars of Rome, right? Exactly, Caesari Rum. You got to remember, like Europe, if you take out the Roman Empire out of like Europe's history, no offense, Europeans, but you're going to be left with a massive hole. Like even after Rome fell, right? Even after Rome fell, the amount of states in Europe that wanted to legitimize themselves by having some faint connection to like the Holy Roman Empire. What the hell is the Holy Roman Empire? With all due respect. They wanted to legitimize themselves by having some sort of a connection to the Roman Empire. It's crazy. So yeah, no, the Ottomans are definitely a European power. They're Muslims, they're culturally Muslims and everything, but politically they're also Europeans too.
The same can be said about Al-Andalus. Al-Andalus also interfered in European politics. Otto the Great had to. Sorry.
100%. Sorry, I
Yeah.
was backing you up.
Yeah. So same like when I think Abdurrahman III was coronated as caliph, there were
Yeah.
European monarchs present at that coronation. So it was pretty much
His mom. He had to dye his hair black
yeah.
for like most of his life, and he had piercing blue eyes because his mom was Basque or Galician or something.
She was herself. I don't think she was a princess, but her mother was a princess, I think.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, so why did you upload the episode the day you did? First of all, I don't think Muawiyah has anything to do with the whole thing, so people shouldn't get angry over that. But secondly, I actually had planned the video earlier. I even texted a friend of mine about it, complaining about how bad my luck is that I finally went around to making the video and I forgot that Ashura was nearby. And thirdly, I actually had to. I hadn't made a video for 3 weeks, and I didn't wanted to make a month. YouTube really tends to penalize you if you don't make a video regularly. So that's the reason that I chose to upload it. I really didn't want to stir the pot or anything. I honestly did not think that uploading it on that day would actually have that much of a problem. I got a lot of my regular people who regularly comment and say supportive things, even they that didn't think that was good. And I didn't intend to stir the pot with Shia Muslims or whatever. I had no plans like that because honestly, I really didn't think that this was as much of a deal. I didn't think that it was as controversial as people think of it as, because it's been 1300 years.
Okay. Can I take control of the questions for for a couple minutes, please?
Sure.
Okay. First of all, there's a question which says the quick one. Why for Hikmah, World of Paul 12? Why do you have a personal rule not to touch the early medieval stuff? Let's just quickly
Can I answer this before that?
Okay, but don't be cheeky. Go on.
Well, because Hikmah is afraid. It's simple as that. He doesn't want to touch controversial things. He has a rule not to touch things pre 661, and he hasn't even touched anything before like 700, before 900, I would say.
Nice, you did my job for me, but in a slightly nicer way. Pre 661, for all the people that might not know this, there are Muslims, not Muslims, most Muslims to be honest. No, every Muslim, they consider that what I like to call holy history, meaning that the people involved, they were obviously real and they had political titles, they had jobs that can be analyzed from a historical point of view, but they're considered holy people. So meaning that I can't do my job honestly to analyze and observe them. And if I can't do that, A, I don't need that stress in my life. So Siyawish is right, the fear thing. And B, that just doesn't entice me. I don't want a sanitized explanation of everything. If the truth is not sanitized, if the truth is sanitized, I'll spit panegyrics about any figure in history. But if it's not, I'd like to tell what actually happened. And if I'm going to do that and it's going to annoy people, what's the point? There's so much history anyway. Okay, moving on. There's another one I like.
Second, he said the Savage is too afraid to cover topics taking a 1920. No, actually, that's not true. The thing is that modern history intimidates me, not because I'm afraid to touch it, but because it's really, really complicated, and my ethical sort of situation changes. At that point, I start thinking of these things as personal, because for example, the Holocaust and stuff. People who witnessed it, there are still people alive, so it's very difficult for me to touch that. But
also, Siyawish, be honest. Let's tell the people. I think it's finally time we tell the people. Me and Siyawish, we have this unwritten rule where I cover modern stuff, he covers a lot of early medieval stuff, and we don't interject in each other's territories.
Well, but I do have a video coming about not Nasir, but about Marxism in the Islamic world, so keep an eye out for that.
Okay, but remember, if you ever want to do modern stuff, we need to talk about this stuff.
We have to collaborate at least on these topics.
Okay. Also, I just want to give a shout out to Andrea Scovano, who said you can tell Hikmah history is connected to us Italians, because he says, with all due respect, after giving the most savage roast in human history. That is because of my obsession. I hope Italians don't get offended by this. It's just when I was younger, I was just obsessed with the mafia, right? Watching mafia movies, researching about them. The Italian-American mafia, I mean, like La Cosa Nostra. So that's an ode to that period in my life. I thought it would be good.
So you think all Italians are mobsters then?
Absolutely no. I think Italian culture is absolutely fascinating. It's so
flippant. They're always just like going with pasta and doing like this? Is that what you think?
No, definitely not. Some of my favorite scholars, architects, they're Italian. Like Leonardo da Vinci, dude, that he's one of my favorite human beings to like study. Not my favorite human being, but like to study. Fascinating guy.
I'm actually going to Italy in September.
Oh, nice. What part?
Well, we're going to Rome, but then Florence and Venice as well.
Very nice. Very nice.
So any other question you want to take?
I think there was one more, but one second. Don't go anywhere. Oh yeah, why is Tamerlane demonized these days by Shimra? It's the one above the Andrea Scovano one.
West Hammer. Well, shouldn't he be? He was
Hell no.
one of the
Why?
awful Muslims to have ever lived.
Listen, dude, don't do that. Don't do that. Because if we're going to hold him to that standard, let's hold everyone to that standard. Do you know the kind of things that Babur did? Like skull pyramids was like a pastime hobby of his.
Babur did that. That's just, I always thought that's Hindu nationalist propaganda.
No, 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 no. He did it against Pashtuns. When he was a ruler of. Don't. We're
It's
being serious. We're being serious. Calm down.
I'm
Chill,
sorry
dog.
to other Pashtuns other than Hikmah history.
Chill. No, no, no. When he was a ruler of Kabul before, like a decade, 2 decades, 15 years before he even went into India and fought the Lodis, he would make routine campaigns going towards what is now like the border area between Afghanistan and Pakistan, Bajiwar, Kuram, all of those areas. And obviously the Pashtuns, they're not big fans of people coming and telling them what to do. So they would have battles, and then subsequently he would erect skull pyramids. The only reason he did not erect skull pyramids on the same level as his ancestor Timur did is because of resources. He didn't have the same size of an army, the same kind of resources. But there's
Actually,
loads of those
on
examples.
that.
Dude, some of the things that the Ottomans did in the Balkans, you wouldn't believe it, right? The Mughals, like some of the things that they did. What the hell, dude? You can't just hold Tamerlane to that standard and then just excuse everyone else. It's the exact same thing with Genghis Khan. It annoys me when people demonize them, and I can understand to some extent why people do it, right? Skull pyramids, you get a bit squeamish, violence is not a very fun thing.
Not very fun, a little bit fun, just.
Well, everything has context. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that if you demonize him, the big problem with that is you won't be able to take the necessary lessons away from his life that you need to, because you'll just say, oh yeah, Timur was just a demon, he was just an animal. Well, yeah, those things, but he was also a genius. Let's put it frankly. He was an absolute genius.
I mean, this comment is really good on that. I mean, you're saying that Timur shouldn't be demonized because Babur isn't demonized. How about we demonize Babur as well then?
No, but Babur is one example. Then you're gonna have to demonize everybody. Nader Shah, what are you talking about, dude? All of these people, you can't do that.
I mean, on my channel, people know that I am arbitrarily. I'm saying arbitrarily because I'm against three people very much. I hate three people very much arbitrarily. The third one, of course. Yeah. So there's Timur, Nader Shah, and Ahmad Shah Abdali.
Hey, chill. Why?
These three people attacked my country. And that's arbitrary. I hate them because I hate them. It doesn't mean that they were the worst human beings who ever lived, or they deserve more hatred than all the others. It's arbitrary. It's purely based on my subjective feelings. But I think that Timur had Timur, I wouldn't say that Timur had much to teach people, but for example,
dude, what are you talking about?
What would you learn from him?
Huh?
What would you learn from him? What do you think some of his good qualities are?
Pay attention. Okay? Mm-hmm. Class is in session right now. Let me just chew this walnut.
Okay.
No. Listen. I'm being dead serious. For the sake of brevity, I'll summarize a couple things. Number one, there is a man that was essentially a limp in the medieval period, and he did not take that to curtail his ambition. Okay, all those grandiose ambitions he had in his head, even with this thing weighing him down, basically one limb not working, and it's a leg, by the way. Mm-hmm. He did not use that as an excuse to say, "Oh, I can't make it." Right? How many people in normal day-to-day life, something happens to them and they use that as an excuse to put a lid on their ambition? Most people have trouble with that. I have trouble with that. Every time I take a loss that's even slightly meaningful, I think to myself, what's the point of trying? right? Everybody goes through this. And sometimes people allow that to defeat them. This man didn't allow a limb, basically losing a limb, to defeat him. And in what category are we talking about? This is not nerdy Tariq sitting down at a computer all day and typing for his work. This is a man who is in the martial field. He is in the military field, and he doesn't have a limb. He has 3 limbs, but he doesn't use that as an excuse to say, okay, there's no point in trying. Number one. Number two, one of my favorite things about him, men, women definitely too, but a lot of men, specifically young men, have this problem with immediate gratification, where they will think of a really cool ambition in their head, a really cool vision, and they think, I want that now. Unfortunately, that's not how life works. You have to put in the time, and then loads of other things have to go your way. And then with patience, with perseverance, with understanding, gaining understanding from your experiences, you finally get what you want. This man was a master in building a good foundation for himself. He becomes the emir at Balkh, and for 10 years, all he does is he just goes around like northern Afghanistan, southern Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and all those areas, and consolidates his authority in that tiny region. The following 10 years, all he does is he tries to conquer Persia. So today we think of Timur as this world beater, this one of the greatest conquerors of all time. You can literally make an argument that he is the greatest conqueror of all time. It's essentially between him, Alexander, and Genghis. But everything we know about him happened in the last decade of his life. You know what he was doing up until that point? He was preparing for that decade, for that final decade where he was going to paint his magnum opus. Do you understand what level of like personal strength that takes? You don't think he wanted to go to India in the late 1370s? You don't think he wanted to take Syria in the early 1380s? No, he understood that I have to put my time in first, build myself, and then go ahead and do my thing. That's another thing. And then with all of this in mind, the way that he was so loose and nimble with his strategy, like his wartime strategy, how he fought battles in one way against the Delhi Sultanate and then fought back. Dude, this guy went to Anatolia, he went to the Ottomans' own realm, and he beat them by having a better understanding of his enemy's land than he did. What are you talking about? This guy is a genius in capital letters. This is the problem. When you demonize a person, of course, and I like the fact what you said, like personally, because of what he's done to where I'm from, I have these opinions against him. And as long as you're aware of that and you don't let that get in the way of your scholarship, then that's completely fine. You're a human being. You have that right. But when you allow that to cloud your judgment, you fail to recognize these things. You just think, oh, Timur, scary guy, skull pyramids. Yeah, those things too. But read the genius. There's a genius here. We're actually working with a definite genius. Dude, come on.
First of all, I'm actually gonna cut this part of the live stream. I'm gonna use it to make one of those motivational videos. You know,
yeah, put some music in the background too.
Yeah, put some music, and you know what? Those TikTok text, that big letters and stuff.
Yeah. Dude,
secondly,
don't do Timur like that.
I mean, I'm gonna do you like that, not Timur. I mean, I'm gonna use you're using his example to motivate people. I'm gonna do that.
Okay, good. But wait, what do you have to say against what I just said? Just out of my curiosity.
About Timur. Timur was certainly admirable. I talked about it in that regard, in his military prowess. I talked about that in one of my videos where I said that more than anybody else in Islamic history, he knew how to control his army. There's this story about him conquering, I think, Herat, or someplace in the Central Asian plateau, where he the defender of the castle, he actually called him out to come out and we'll fight 1-1. And Timur, despite the fact that he was missing a limb, he not missing a limb, but it wasn't useful. He walked to the city gates. He actually was going to show his men that you're not fighting for me, you're fighting with me. So he was really great at that. He was really great at. He was the first among equals kind of thing. He had really all that going on in terms of like leadership. Yeah, but first of all, he didn't build an empire. You want to learn resilience from him? Sure, go ahead. If you have become disabled, then you should definitely go out and become one of the history's biggest genocidal maniacs. That is really the way to go from there. But other than that, he didn't like even Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan realized that there were bureaucratic problems with his empire. He
Yeah.
he took the writing system from the Uyghurs. He tried to build a bureaucracy, even though so much that he actually tried to. He knew that some cities were vital for the region that they were in, so he tried to work with them. He tried to rebuild things. He did that, and that's the reason that his empire lasted longer than the Timurids. Everything that you have to admire about the Timurids, other than this resilience and this fighting and all that, it actually comes from his sons, his descendants, not from him. The only thing he actually did was conquer and destroy. His personal story, sure, you can learn from that as much as you want, but as an emperor, all he did was build it. It was conquer and destroy. That's the whole thing that he did. He didn't have any respect for any place other than Samarkand. Even as a Muslim, he destroyed Damascus. He destroyed a vast majority, and that's my problem with Hindu nationalists always complaining about him, because a vast majority of the people that he killed were Muslim.
No, most of them. What are you talking about? No,
Vast majority,
all of
most
them.
of them, most of them
Persia,
were.
do you know what he did in Persia?
Mhm.
Dude, I don't even know how many cities he went to in Persia.
Yeah.
And he built skull pyramids. They
Yeah.
took the worst brunt of it. Persia, Armenia, Georgia. Those
Yeah.
like 3 countries.
Yeah, and like a vast majority, maybe something like, I don't want to throw numbers, but maybe something like 80 to 90% of the people that he killed were Muslims. And so I wouldn't say that there's anything admirable about him. I mean, you told the story of his resilience. That's cool. That's personal stories. As far as personal stories go, cool. But I mean, it would be an interesting movie, but really nothing beyond that.
Okay. Fair enough. I was talking about on him like as an individual, right? We are talking about him being demonized, so we kind of do need to talk about him as an individual. All the other things you said, I agree with everything apart from one thing. Do take into consideration, because people just think that the Timurid Empire, sometimes I feel like people think the Timurid Empire died with Timur. That's not true.
That's not true.
Don't like don't do that, because the Timurid Renaissance that happened in around Samarkand and Herat and those kind of areas, that happened 40 years after his death, right? So I know it's still very short, very, very short, and I know as an empire builder, he wasn't sensational in that regard, far from it. But like the Timurid Renaissance, you do have to kind of give him something for that.
Yeah. I always say that Timur actually just cleared the land. His successors built the empire on top of it.
Yeah, but that's not very
nasty.
Yeah, you're being too harsh, but okay.
Okay, so any other question?
Any other question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why were the Muslims able to conquer with we need more. May Allah curse the Umayyads. Goddamn. All right.
People's emotions about the Umayyads are just crazy, and in Pakistan and India,
I never knew this. It's only through your channel and the content you make that I realized this. What the hell?
I always thought that among the Shias it was common, and
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
And then I made the video and I learned that it's actually quite common. Before this as well, I know that in Pakistan and India, there's a new cleric called Engineer Muhammad Ali Mirza, who's been making a lot of videos vilifying the Umayyads and Muawiyah as well. So much so that he actually doesn't want to say he's a Sunni, and he doesn't want to say radiyallahu anhu after Muawiyah's name. So he doesn't say Muawiyah's name. He just calls him the Emir of Syria. And so because of that, a lot of vilification has been happening in Pakistan and India. I knew that. among the youth, but I didn't know that it was such a wide scale. I thought there was room to have a historical discussion, and I honestly was planning.
Can you break it down for me? Because from the Shia perspective, I definitely get it. We don't need to go into that at all, but from a non-Shia Muslim perspective, why is there such vitriol against the Umayyads?
There are a lot of hadiths about Muawiyah. Well, not hadiths, but I don't know what the word is in, but rawayat. Do you know what a rawayat is?
Rawayat?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's not the same word in Urdu because we also have different words for things. So there are all these things, and they're authentic, about how Muawiyah did this and this and this, and how he cursed Ali, and how he contributed to sort of the moral downfall of Islam. So there's a lot of this new research is coming ahead, about how Muawiyah had a problem with Ali and all these things. So it's starting to become much come on a much bigger scale, among the Sunnis as well. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of, but I'm still a little like surprised by it, to be honest.
Yeah,
your response was good, but like, yeah.
Yes, they've got everything sort of worked out. I was talking to a friend of mine and we were arguing about it, and I said, well, what about Constantinople? Yazid was the one who led the army against Constantinople, and according to the Prophet's hadith, the first army to attack Constantinople will get paradise. So what about that? And they have an answer for everything. It's incredible. He said that, well, Yazid that wasn't the first attack. Well, why not? Because this and this. They've all these things. And historically, it doesn't make any sense, but religiously, you cannot really argue with all that. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. You don't watch anime, do you? Because there's a fun anime question.
There's
but
Attack on the Titan one.
Attack on Titan, not on the Titan.
There's one into cannibalism.
Do you know about this? Is there? I don't want you to feel left out.
I don't know anything, but you can answer it. It's cool.
Okay, Tariq, since you know about Attack on Titan, how do you think Islam will respond to people with the ability to? Damn, dude, this is such a great question. I've thought about this too. So basically, Attack on Titan is this Japanese anime. It is absolutely sensational. Like, if you die without watching this show, like, you've missed something. I'm telling you, you've missed something. The show is about a bunch of cannibalistic giants that prey on humans, and the humans, what they do to defend themselves is they build these massive walls. So they build these kind of medieval style cities that have massive walls around them, and there quickly emerges a clerical class in society, and the walls end up being venerated as if they're the things saving humans, right? Because they're keeping the giants away. So the people literally venerate them, like they're considered holy, right? And the clerical class, they're always talking about like the walls, you have to respect them, you have to whatever, non-animate objects and things like that. And it's definitely taken a lot of inspiration from Judeo-Christian ideas and whatnot. Like, even they look like priests, the clerical class and whatnot, and they talk like European medieval priests and everything. So the question is, how do you think Islam will respond? How would Islam? Damn, it's a good question. I don't know, man.
I don't know much, but cannibalistic giants, I think Muslims would just say that they're jinns or something. No?
Yeah, no, but what the question is asking, sorry, an extra layer of context is that there emerges a conflict within the city between people who want to take, and they're obviously the slightly more younger people who want to take a more direct approach by going out of the walls to go and attack the giants. And then the clergy, when they hear this, they basically accuse them of being blasphemous, because they're saying, oh, so you're indirectly saying that the walls which they venerate are not good enough to protect us? Like, are you disrespecting the walls, these things that are essential for our survival and everything, our sustenance? So there emerges that kind of a conflict. And I think this question, I'm not sure, but I think this question is kind of asking about, like, what would people's approach and strategy be if they were Muslims in that scenario?
I mean, there is precedent for going out and fighting,
Yes,
and Islam is certainly against veneration of such inanimate objects. You know,
yes.
I can imagine that there would be people who would be saying, "No, Allah is protecting us, not these walls." Um,
Yeah.
so, I mean, I don't know that much about the anime, but yeah, that's what I think.
I think, yeah, that makes sense. But I think a lot of it would be similar. I'm sorry to anybody I offend, Muslims or anything. I think a lot of it would go down in a similar fashion. You know what I mean? Siawish raised a very good point. In Islam, you're not allowed to venerate non-animate objects. So I think that would be pretty different. But even then, you would have a lot of you would place a lot of value on the walls protecting you, because at that point, it's got nothing to do with Christianity or Islam. It's just human nature. You know, you see these big things preventing giants from coming over to eat you. You'd be quite respectful of those things saving you. So I don't know how different it would be. But this is a lovely question. I'm going to think about it some more.
I mean, yeah, even with real Islam, we did see Islam becoming a sort of folk Islam where people started venerating holy artifacts. So could be.
Okay. Here's a good question by Andrea Scovano. It's kind of annoying because it's in two parts, so I don't know how you're going to pin it.
Yeah. What is it?
Another question. In the West, it is very hard to distinguish various Islamic states culturally instead of all having a same look.
Mhm.
That's part one. Part two, what are differentiating traits between, say, an Arab, Persian, Berber, or Pashtun dynasty in terms of architecture and culture?
Okay.
Um,
Can I be very racist?
no. Look. The reason I brought this up is because Andrea, in full discretion, this to a person who is an Arab, Persian, Berber, whatever, this seems like a very silly question. I'm going to be honest with you. And it seems, if I didn't think otherwise, this could very easily be interpreted as either a dumb question or a disrespectful question, right? Because the answer is pretty obvious. Like, of course, I mean, Pashtuns live in flipping eastern Afghanistan, Berbers live in Morocco. You need like a 10-hour flight to go to
Also,
the two
the word
areas.
Berber is offensive. You should use the term Amazigh.
Amazigh, but that's slightly different. But anyway, but I can understand how, from like an outside perspective, these things can be a little difficult, because I'm not gonna lie, I thought people from Alabama were the exact same as people from Wisconsin or from California, right? It's just you lump people into the same category. But let's break it down. See, I wish you want to start first.
I mean, if you wanted to, it's kind of if you wanted to, if you confuse a Canadian with an American, the Canadian will be offended. And
Yeah.
if they explain to us what the difference is, we still would say, yeah, that sounds the same as Americans.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. What differentiating traits between Arabs, Persians? I
First
don't
of all, basically, the short answer is, sorry to cut my friend off, everything
know.
apart from Islam. And to be honest with you, if we want to get real sophisticated with this explanation, even Islam, like the way they practice, maybe the kind of school of jurisprudence that they ascribe to, or the type of Islam. I mean, Persians are Shia. The others three that you mentioned, for the most part, they're Sunnis. I mean, I know Arabs, you can be Shia as well. So language, different. And I know Amazigh doesn't have the Arabic
No.
whatever, but I know they have the same script and everything. But no, the languages are different, right?
They have their own script as well. It's really cool looking script. I really want
Very
to learn
cool.
someday.
Yeah. It looks like something out of like a J.R. Tolkien
Yeah,
book.
exactly. Like a sci-fi
Um,
thing, kind of.
Food. So language. Where is the camera here?
Mhm.
Language, food. Big difference. Yeah, there is. There is. For the record, Afghan food is the best. Anyway, moving on. Culture. There are differences. Yeah, there's differences in a lot of different things. Man and woman, how society deals with them. I know it looks like uh, the whole of the Islamic world seems to have quite a traditional approach to how a woman dresses or just pertaining to a woman's role in society, but there are massive differences amongst them. Massive, massive differences. Historically, there's loads of differences. Geography, there's loads of differences. And I know that doesn't sound important, but in all honesty, I low key think that might be the most important thing because that's going to determine so many other things that happen, all the other things that I mentioned, food, language, whatever. It's going to be determined in a big chunk by geography. And just like outlook too, like how they think, how they just, I can tell a difference. Like when I talk to a Pashtun from the mountains, it feels very different when I'm talking to an urban Persian. But very different. It's like night and day. It's more, yeah, it's very different. Um, there's just a lot of differences, basically in everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance. It's like explaining the difference between the French and the Germans. To just simply say, oh yeah, one drinks a lot of beer, the other eats a lot of croissant, whatever. But you got to get into nuances. If you don't want to be racist or only adhere to stereotypes, then you got to be really.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I think in some ways it's bigger. The differences between the French and the German is not the same as the difference between the Pashtun and the Arabs. That I know when you look at them, and they both have nomadic cultures. The Kochian and the Bedouins. You can make correlations. Islam, the script, the Arabic script, whatever. They are so different. It's night and day. And
Yeah.
again, geography.
What I
Geography.
meant was, it's like
Very important in
explaining
that.
the difference between any two peoples. It's different. It's difficult to explain the difference between any two peoples without resorting to sort of just stereotypes. If you have a lot of time, then you can go into nuances. But in simple, it's difficult to do that. We've gotten this question a lot of times. What is your opinion on the Muslim historian Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari? Well, al-Tabari is, of course, an authority on the whole, especially the Abbasid period. He's considered an authority. So yeah, my opinion on his is, I didn't get rely on him too much for the Muawiyah video, because of the inherent bias that Muslims of that time had. But yeah, other than that, he's really cool.
I'll be honest with you. I just know.
The name.
No, no, I know a little bit more than the name. I know like a brief synopsis of what he was about, polymath, etc. All of these things, but I can't delve into his like style of historiographical writing.
Yeah, he said being in Med, I can recognize the difference between Turks and Arabs because Turks won't shut up about it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
pretty much the difference between all of us. When you just confuse us for somebody, and then we'll tell you, you confuse an Indian for a Pakistani or a Pakistani for an Indian, and like I can tell when somebody is a Pakistani or an Indian just by looking at them.
Dude,
But
dude, listen. So I just realized we're over here giving like a great big philosophical breakdown. This guy is from Italy, right? Think
Mhm.
about the difference between northerners, right? Say somebody from Milan and somebody from Naples, Neapolitan, right? Think about it, because through watching The Sopranos and The Godfather and things like that, I've come to understand that there is a humongous gulf uh, between how they flip and think of themselves, like a Neapolitan versus a northerner, some from Lombardy or anywhere else like that. That's what I'm talking about, and that's within a country, right? So Siawish, my friend, is unfortunately from Pakistan. I'm joking. Within Pakistan, right? Siawish, listen.
Mhm.
Punjabis, Pashtuns. Can you tell a difference in just meeting them? Forget like a philosophical breakdown. Just meeting them. Can you tell a difference?
Mostly yes, because Pashtun are light skinned compared to us.
Light skin, the way they talk, the food they eat, the language they speak, the way, like the
Can I
build.
be racist again?
What? Don't do that, because I have ammunition for months, but I
Oh,
don't
let
want
it
to
go
get
then.
censored. So there's differences. There's huge differences. Pakistani food is goated. I don't think it's goated. I think it's. I'll be honest with you. It's my firstly Pakistani food. What does that mean? Punjabi food is probably my second or third favorite. Obviously, Afghan food is the best. That's not even fair.
In his incorrect opinion, yes, it is the best.
No, but dude, how do you beat Afghan food? It's literally you've got on one end you've got the bland Persian. I apologize to the Persian people, but like your food is a little bit more on the blander side, right? You don't make so much use of masala and things like that. And then on the other side you have Indians, right? Who all they do is flipping masala, right? And in the middle you've got this perfect balance of Afghans who
You've
use
got
some of the masalas from the Indian subcontinent, and then they also appreciate the original authentic identity of foods that don't need to be sullied by spices. Do you
yeah, of
understand?
course, they don't need to be sullied by spices. But here we have a people who think that it's okay to add raisins to rice.
Yeah,
I
hell
think
yeah,
that
and
there's
carrots. Don't forget carrots
no, carrots
and
are fine. It's
pistachios
raisins,
and
raisins that are a
almonds.
problem.
Yeah,
I mean, that I think that says everything that needs to be said about Afghan
dude,
food.
what are you talking about? You got your kebabs from us.
That doesn't mean we improved on your kebabs. I mean, I'm pretty sure that you guys would have added raisins to that too if we had just let you have that.
Take away Peshawar. Just take away Peshawar and everything it provides culinary wise. What does Pakistan have in terms of food?
I'm gonna
Exactly.
be racist again.
Exactly.
I don't want to be racist on a public platform, but no, Pakistan has a lot of biryani, for example. You know, we got biryani.
Oh, but that's Indian. No, dude, I'm talking about Pakistan.
What's India?
That's Indian.
What's India?
Okay. By the way, I only said that to get you riled up. I was joking.
I mean, you know, nihari. Yes, of course we have nihari. Have you ever tried nihari?
I love nihari. Have I ever tried nihari? What are you talking about?
It's amazing.
Love nihari. It's amazing.
I mean,
it's phenomenal.
Even though it comes from the same people who add potato to biryani, but yes.
I honestly think nihari might be.
This person's Pakistani nationality needs to be stripped. I've never said that about anybody, but this person's nationality needs to be stripped.
No. She or he is an enlightened person. Nihari might be my favorite Punjabi dish, to be honest. I like nihari.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Plus also it's always sort of a food that's catered to white people. It's always a little bit bland.
Yeah. Definitely.
Are you Pashtun? Do you want to answer this?
I guess I'll say that. Yeah, I'm Pashtun.
So do you want another question?
Let's see what's going on.
This is an interesting one about the Umayyads, and I've seen this question multiple times. Do you want to touch this?
Do I want to touch this? Sorry, 1 second. What is the question? Why did the Umayyads focus on relative backwaters like Khazaria and Transoxiana, or even Europe instead of India, despite its men? Well, first of all, we gotta unpack this, my friend. Actually, to be fair, no. I shouldn't get triggered so easily. Yes, you can say that Khazaria is a relative backwater, but also think about its location, right? Like you got to remember, like empires, the way that they would think, in terms of their borders, is in an ideal world, you want natural borders. So it's a mountain.
Rivers, mountains, etc.
Rivers, mountains, coastlines, things like that. If you can get a massive mountain range as one of your borders, that is a priority. You need to do that ASAP. You know what I'm saying? And Transoxiana and Khorasan, it's a bit harsh to call that a relative backwater. I mean, because of their location on the Silk Road, B, because of their geopolitically important, geopolitically strategic location as well. How if you get Khorasan, you're basically spoiled for choice. Like, where do you go? Do you go further north up into proper Central Asia? Do you go further south into the India, or do you find a way around the Tian Shan Mountains, Fergana Valley, into China and things like that as well? So I don't know if those are, not places worth having, but I understand your point. Compared to India with its immense riches,
There's also the fact that beyond Transoxiana there were the Turks. As a frontier, Transoxiana had to be controlled to avoid regular raids by the Turks, because that would have been a huge problem for the Umayyads. And India, despite it was immensely rich, it was actually too far from Damascus to effectively control, which is why it was sort of a footnote in Umayyad history. I mean, the only thing we know about, beyond the fact that Muhammad ibn Qasim conquered Sindh. Do you know? Does anybody, even the commenter, do you know anything else about Umayyad India? That's how much of a footnote it was in Umayyad history. So
Yeah.
that's because it was just too far away, and I don't think that the Umayyads really focused on that. Because
And also remember, India is humongous. Yeah?
Yeah.
Like India, first of all, India today is humongous. Can you imagine what people considered? And I know there is a variety in what Hindustan means, northern India, all of India, subcontinent, whatever. But it would have been such a big place. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That it's not something you would just go, hey, let's conquer India.
Yeah, and back then, India constituted what is now Afghanistan, and who wants to rule Afghanistan?
Hey, everybody. That's literally why it's called the graveyard of empires, because everybody wants to rule it.
Nobody wants to rule it. It just leads to India, and that's why people want to control it.
Yeah, but that's potato. What the hell?
That is the whole thing,
Yeah, but they want Afghanistan.
So
India is a 20th century invention. Okay, let's not go down that route.
I mean, I agree with it, but yeah, I won't go.
Man, we need some more modern questions.
Yeah, because your expertise.
No, because they're juicier. I mean, I like all history.
Yeah. I actually have been thinking about that. That the fact that you make videos on modern history, that gets a lot of views. I really should get into that, because I want to touch the topics that will get a lot of views. One of the topics that I have is about Fred Donner's work on the Believers movement. That is going to be a really interesting thing, but I don't think a lot of people are going to understand it. A lot of people are just going to be offended about it.
The Believers movement?
Yeah, Fred Donner's work on the Believers movement.
I'm not familiar. Bring me up.
Well, his work, he believes that what we call Muslim didn't exist back during the Prophet's lifetime. There were the Believers, which was an ecumenical movement. It constituted Jews, and most of the Jews and what we now call Muslims. It constituted beyond people's religions. Because the Ummah document, or what we call the Constitution of Medina, it actually calls Jews part of the Ummah. It actually takes them in as well. And so it's very interesting in that regard that there's a lot of work on that front. Plus, he talks about Islam. When you strip Islam of all the later inventions, according to him, I'm not saying I agree with it, but he says that on the core of Islam, there are two ideas, actually three ideas. There's Tawheed, the oneness of God. There's the end of days, the hour, and then there's Hijrah, migration. That you have to, if you live in a sinful society, you have to move and go to a place where you can build a nicer, more Islamic society. So that's a lot of interesting ideas in there. He says that the reason behind Abu Bakr as-Siddiq's title as-Siddiq is because he collected taxes. And so a lot of interesting ideas in that book that I really want to
Dude, that sounds fascinating. Why are you not excited about that?
I'm very excited about that. I've read that book 8 times. That is the only book I've read that many times in my life.
8 times? How big is it?
It's like this big. I don't know, 200 pages. I think 250 pages. But I mean, I used to read it on the train a lot, and I used to travel when I was in Germany. I used to travel a lot, so I always had it with me. And that's something that I really want to cover, but I don't know if people are not going to understand it, and it's just going to lead more.
I would say that's your responsibility, dude. Like, that's your whole job, is to make people understand.
I don't know. I mean, with the Muawiyah thing as well. I mean, I didn't bring Islam into it. I didn't talk anything. I mean, Islam says that Muawiyah was a writer of the revelation stuff. I didn't talk about any of that because I just kept Islam out of it. But people didn't take it lightly. And I think that when you bring the Prophet into it, in Farsi they say "Ba Khuda Diwana War Ba Muhammad Hushyar." So with the Prophet, it's going to be really difficult to do that, maneuver that. But I'm going to look into that as well.
Okay. All
Do you
right.
want to
Dude,
take this?
let's start thinking about wrapping up. Let's take like 2 or 3 more questions.
Mhm.
Uh,
Actually, this would. Do you want to? If you don't want to touch, there's another one that's really good.
what is it?
It's about Egypt modernizing and what happened. Why did they fail? Because you know more about this stuff.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, let me just address one real quick. Is that fine? If
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on Imran Khan going to jail for 3 years? He's not going to go to jail for 3 years. That's just it's Pakistan. People are pretending like this is the first politician to have been sentenced and arrested. It happens every single day. Same happened to Nawaz Sharif, and everything happens. It's not gonna end up meaning anything in the long run.
Hmm.
So yeah. Okay, this one. Do you want to take this?
This might be a question for you. Okay. Very nice. All right. So, in around 1804 or 1805, well, no, let's rewind 6 years. 1798, Napoleon, he wants to make a name for himself. So he goes to Egypt, and he actually does conquer Egypt. He takes it away from the Ottoman governors, who at the time were the Mamluks, and he starts ruling it. The British hear about this, and basically within a year or so, they start freaking out because they know that one of the main reasons that Napoleon did this was that it would have an impact on British possessions in India. Yeah. And you got to remember, you can't understand the British Empire story without understanding the importance of India within that. So the British freak out. Long story short, they gang up with the Ottomans and they kick out Napoleon. But before they kick out Napoleon, Napoleon actually not only brings an army, but he brings savants, right? Scientists, thinkers, archaeologists, very, very important. They end up searching for the Rosetta Stone and things like that as well. But this has a very big impact on the Islamic world. I have a video how Napoleon changed the Islamic world, something like that.
You do?
Yes, it is. Dude, it's one of my best videos, and it's not a very good performing video. It's so infuriating. I put so much work into that. My boy, my friend Ruben, he helped me with the script for that.
I thought I was your only friend.
Huh?
I thought I was your only friend.
No, we're not friends.
Wow.
No. You haven't been promoted to being my friend yet.
Rude.
No. Whoa.
But yeah, okay, continue.
Yeah. So, as I was saying, so after he leaves, there's a guy by the name of Muhammad Ali Pasha. He comes to power, and he has his own vision for what should happen in Egypt. He continues to rule in name as an Ottoman governor, but he is de facto independent. He aggressively modernizes Egypt, using France as a model. Starts sending out young Egyptian students to France, places like that, bring them back so that they can start building institutions. And at the same time, he's modernizing the army. He's doing things with the economy. And Egypt makes a lot of progress, which is why Andreas Scovano said, was rapidly modernizing at the beginning. And then they actually end up going to war with the Ottomans, and they are destroying the Ottomans. They look like, for all intents and purposes, in the 1830s, early 1830s, that they're going to march on Constantinople and take it over. Europe starts freaking out and realizes, whoa, we would rather have a weak Ottoman that we meaning the British and the Russians mainly, but the French are always involved too, can manipulate, rather than having this young, powerful, dynamic, ambitious state rise to the ascend, essentially. So they gang up with the Ottomans, put Muhammad Ali Pasha in check, and that happens. Fast forward 20, 30, 40 years later, Muhammad Ali Pasha has a grandson, I think. by the name of Ismail. I don't know why this guy has also been labeled with the term the Magnificent, because he wasn't magnificent. This guy was basically like, those spoiled people that just like to spend money a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like that. He essentially bankrupted his country. Obviously, it's not that simple. For the purpose of brevity, I'm just kind of skipping through things. But he took out massive loans from the British and the French to pay for infrastructure projects within Egypt, railways, buildings, roads, whatever, all of that stuff. And he realized in the 1870s, I can't pay for this. So he, in return, because he couldn't pay back his debtors, he ended up giving the British and the French more and more control within Egypt, economic control. So I can't pay for this, so I'll give you a monopoly on this trade. And the money you extract for that will go back into paying that debt that I had for you. Before you know it, the British roll in and they take control of the country. By like the Urabi revolt is like 1882, right? So yeah, by the 1880s, they've basically, within the space of like 15 years, they've gone from being de facto independent to now being under the control of the British. And just as a symbol of what this guy, how he acted, it was during his reign that the Suez Canal was built. Yeah, remember, the Suez Canal was built with British and French investors' money, like ordinary investors' money. And so he just allowed European imperial powers to encroach more and more on his nation's sovereignty because of his superfluous spending. That's it. That's how they failed.
I actually don't know anything on the topic, so I'm not gonna say anything.
Any
Yeah,
other questions?
the chart that I'm working on, I actually need your help on modern Islamic history, so we'll talk about that as well.
Okay, we'll do it.
Okay.
Any others? Let's take one more.
Okay, then let's make it a. Do you know about Edward Said?
I do. What about him?
Stormwind is asking, what are your thoughts on the book Orientalism?
I mean,
Take this.
yeah. What do I? You know what? I'm not gonna be a hater, because initially, when my thoughts on Edward Said were, well, duh, like a lot of the things you're saying, I thought it was quite obvious. But then I realized, kind of like that Andreas Scavano question about the differences between all the different Muslim groups. From the outside looking in, it can be a little bit more difficult to figure that out. And from that perspective, especially the kind of impact it's had in Western academia, I salute Mr. Said for that impact that he's had, because without acknowledging the things that he said, it's easy to assume that it would have continued. Like, Western scholars would have just gone into the Middle East, into the Islamic world, with these preconceived notions that are determined much more by their own biases, by their own cultural upbringing, than seeing and observing things for what they are in this area that they are trying to study. So, sensational stuff.
I agree with his ideas, Edward Said's. I agree with quite a bit of the book as well, but I think it goes too far. I think he basically accused. I mean, as far as you mentioned that preconceived notions and all that, that's good. His criticism of Bernard Lewis, which is different from the book, I totally agree with that. Bernard Lewis is not just an Orientalist in the worst meaning of the word, but he also sort of propagated the American imperialist kind of mindset. I was recently looking at the cover the article he wrote for I think People magazine, was it Time magazine, was it? But yeah, I agree with a lot of the criticism, but I think it goes too far, to this point that
Goes too far where?
Sorry?
Goes too far how?
For example, he accuses a lot of people of Orientalism that I don't think applies. But also, I think that his work has been bastardized. I think he himself did it as well, to the extent that if any non-Muslim or Westerner scholar is interested in Islamic history academically, for example, people like Chase Robinson or Michael Cook or even Patricia Crona, they shouldn't be accused of Orientalism. They were just giving new ideas. I don't agree with much of Patricia Crona's research, but it certainly is not Orientalist. But a lot of people accuse every Westerner academic who wants to learn and talk about Islamic history as Orientalist. I think even Edward Said sort of contributed to it. But yeah, I think the general idea is good. The general criticism is good, but when he applies it to a lot of wrong people.
Right.
So yeah, I actually have had Orientalism for a long time. In a printed form, but the form that I have is of a pirated Pakistani copy. It's got terrible print, so I only recently read it on my iPad.
Ah, okay. Dude, that was compulsory reading basically during my masters.
Actually, what does a history degree teach?
What does a history degree teach?
Yeah, like do you guys learn the historical method and textual criticism, etc.?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it depends what you're asking. Like, are you asking at undergrad level, master's level, PhD level? So you would have to get a firmer understanding of the theory side of things, historiography, methodology, things of that nature, and then after that, it essentially just comes down to writing essays and fleshing out your points and figuring out how to position yourself within historiographical debate. At an undergrad level, you do that at a very primitive, in quite a primitive way. But the further you go up, the more you have to be assertive in placing yourself within historiographical debates.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really want to. I have read a couple of books on the historical method.
Yeah.
But I was really curious about how exactly it is that it goes. There was this last question that we should take was about Pakistan and Afghanistan's relationship over the Durand Line. So you present the Afghan perspective. Sorry.
No. I don't do that. Tariq is objective. Tariq has his own beliefs about everything, that are determined by emotions, by subjectivity, by experiences, all of those things. But if we're talking about serious stuff, no, I'm going to try to be objective.
Yeah. Also, Tariq is British now. He's completely British. He drinks tea with
Put it to you this way. Born in Afghanistan, I am Afghan. Spent a good chunk of my childhood in Pakistan, and then a good chunk of my life in Britain. So nobody knows about the Durand Line better than me. I'm joking.
That's a very Donald Trump way of saying it.
Yeah. I know. The Donald. What is the relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan of the Durand Line? Well, to be honest with you, at the moment, dude, Afghanistan has a lot of different problems, and the Durand Line is nowhere near at the top of its priorities. Throughout its history, the same in Pakistan? Yeah, I'm assuming so. That hasn't always been the case. When Pakistan was first being created, 1950s, 1960s, all the way up until the 1970s, it was, to varying degrees, an issue of high importance. But right now, not so much. In terms of what, I guess that's what the question asks. Should I go into what I think will happen in the future or anything like that? Or
I don't know, if you want to go into that, then sure.
Here's the thing. Actually, just for some context, people might not even know what's going on. So the Durand Line, 1893, I want to say, the British come and they officially demarcate a border between British India and Afghanistan. The only issue is
between the civilized people and the savages. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Brother, have some shame, brother.
I'm gonna get canceled over this.
No, so The only problem is that by doing that, what they did is they split up this ethnic group called the Pashtuns.
Mhm.
Historically speaking, the term Afghan and Pashtuns was synonymous. They meant the exact same thing. Obviously, with modern nation building, words change meaning, right? The Ottomans, the Osmanlis, at the highest level, they would not necessarily have been fond of being called Anatolian, right? Anatolian was something that was associated with farmers, pastoralists, things of that nature. You go to the 19th century, you call an Arab governor a Bedouin, he would have slapped you or something, right? They look down at things like that. Now, being a Bedouin is seen as being seen as the original, the authentic Arab. These things, they always change meaning, so that's not that big of a deal. I say that because within Afghanistan, very unfortunately, there's a huge. Actually, it's not even that huge. Why am I blowing out of proportion? There are some people within Afghanistan, specifically the non-Pashtuns, who are making arguments about we should change the name of the country because this is associated too closely with Pashtuns, and other nonsensical arguments of that nature. But in any case, the big problem with it is split up the Pashtuns. Half of them are in Afghanistan, half of them are in Pakistan, and that is a really big problem because those people, like they are the same people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ethnically speaking, linguistically speaking, and
Religiously, of course.
And what?
Religiously, of course, and everything.
Religiously, of course, all of those things. So, Afghans have harbored this irredentist claim to integrate those areas back into Afghanistan properly. But the issue is, it's been around 130 years plus that's happened. And like everything in life, the more time that passes, the more changes will happen. So today, if you go and visit the Pashtuns living in Pakistan, you will be able to detect differences from the Pashtuns living in Afghanistan. 130 years has passed. Naturally, this is going to happen. And from Pakistan's perspective, they would really, really not like to give up this territory for two big reasons. One is nobody wants to give up territory, the obvious one. Two, the natural border, right? That the reason why the British were so adamant on, and they felt so proud of themselves for this line, the Durand line, is because that area is all mountainous. There are basically technically three passes. You got the Khyber Pass in the east, you got the Bolan Pass around Balochistan, Quetta, Kandahar, and then I think there's another way through the Kuram Valley somewhere in the middle too, but I don't think that's a really good option. But so from Pakistan's perspective, this is amazing. They would never want to give this up, and it's a natural buffer to the fertile plains of the Indus Valley, the Indus River. And yeah, I think that's it.
It's pretty much our only natural border, so that's.
Pakistan, I mean, in the west, Sindh, you got Sindh. Dude, what are you talking about? Gilgit Baltistan?
Yeah, but with Kashmir sort of opens Pakistan up in that side.
That's true. I'm thinking from China. From China, you have that.
Yeah. From China, if that's the reason that Pakistan and India both are so interested in Kashmir, that we can actually have a natural border up in north as well. I mean, in the south, there's the desert, and I don't think that the desert makes for a very good border in the modern era.
In the modern era, nice. Excellent.
Back in the day, yes, but not with the planes and tanks. It really doesn't.
Yeah. Very nice. So that's what that's about, man. And yeah. All right, dude.
Okay, so we'll wrap this up then. Thank you very much for joining me, Tariq, and everybody else, for the questions and stuff. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, everybody. Make sure you check out Hikmah History. I want to see you guys comment because you guys seem to have pretty good questions and whatnot.
Also, this channel, I recently found it.
Dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm out here giving a plug.
Yeah, exactly. I want to give a shout out to somebody else who wants.
Firstly, you interrupt me. Secondly, you put up a link to a different channel whilst I'm talking
Exactly.
about my channel.
I don't want people
Where's
to
the
go to
respect?
Hikmah History. You and I are
Brother.
competitors. You and I are rivals.
Brother, where is the respect?
Nowhere. You said we're not friends.
What are you talking about? You just come on, let's be civilized. Put up my channel. What is this? The
Nope.
Fti? What kind of a title is that?
Yeah, be sure to check out that channel. That's a really cool channel.
Don't check out that channel. Don't check out that channel. Check out me. Okay. Don't even check out Al Mukaddima. Forget about Al Mukaddima. That's old news. Hikmah History, new news. Okay. Everybody. Thank
Also,
you.
yeah, we're about to hit 200K, so please get your friends and families and.
Dude, I just did a mic drop. When I do a mic drop, you just end the call. Come on.
Yeah, that's the reason I didn't end the call, because I didn't want your mic drop to be I didn't want you to have it. That's the thing. You said we're not friends. You started this.
Why? Okay, all right. Go on, hurry up. Tell people.
Yep. It's only it's a dichotomy. You're either with me or against me. In this case, you're unfortunately against me. You've chosen the wrong path. Yeah. So yeah. Thank you very much for joining me. Do check Hikmah History and the channel that I mentioned. Do check it more so than Hikmah History, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone.